The Mets' loss against the Tigers came down to one thing and one thing only: the decision to pitch Ryan Helsley.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. This is the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. So the Mets lose their series finale against the Tigers, and we could talk about Clay Holmes and a pretty decent start. We could talk about a big day at the plate for Pete Alonso, or maybe a lack of offense overall throughout the game for the New York Mets. But ultimately, this game comes down to one decision. One decision buried the New York Mets, and that was the decision to pitch Ryan Helsley in the seventh inning of a one-run game where he was going up against the top of the Tigers lineup. Carlos Mendoza is going to try to defend his decision after the game. He's going to talk about trying to breathe some confidence into Helsley, who has been one of the best relievers in baseball over the last couple of years in the National League, although you certainly are forgetting all about that at this point with how bad he has pitched in a Mets uniform. But you're going to hear Mendoza say something along the lines of, we're trying to get Helsley, right? We still trust him. We still trust his ability. And, the blue pit fell in, and then he walked a batter, and all of a sudden you make a bad pitch to Kerry Carpenter and, get you. But the thought process of putting him out there, it cost you a game, and who knows? Maybe the Mets, if they go to Brooks Raley, if they go to Tyler Rogers against the top of that Tigers lineup, who knows? Maybe one of those guys blows the game. Maybe they hold it down. The Mets end up keeping the Tigers off the board, but the hit that Gregory Soto gave up earlier in the game in the fifth inning that scored two that gave the Tigers a lead, maybe that was the game-winning hit, and the Mets never would have scored, and it doesn't matter. It's a moot point. But you're in a pennant race, and not that the Mets are going to catch the Phillies, but you got teams that are nipping at your heels in the wild card race. You can't take any game for granted, and you have an off day. I mean, look, if the Mets were in the middle of a stretch where they played 16 games in 16 days, which they're on the tail end of right now, they just finished that stretch. But if they were in the middle of that stretch and you had a big series against the Reds coming up and you already beat the Tigers and maybe you already had thrown Rogers and Raley and Diaz the night before, so you have the excuse of those guys are tired and all the you can work your way to a point where maybe it makes some sense when you are losing a game to throw Ryan Helsley out there. It would have been worse if Ryan Helsley pitched in a game where the Mets were up 3-2 and then served up a three-run homer. They were losing when he came in. But you had Brooks Raley up and warming after Helsley gives up a bloop single. And he didn't look good the entire outing. I'm not saying, it was only a bloop single. I mean, he couldn't find the strike zone with this slider, as Keith Hernandez was pointing out on the broadcast. But my point is, if Brooks Raley was good to go to the point where had Helsley walked Kerry Carpenter instead of serving up a three-run homer, and Raley would have come in to try to bail you out of a bases-loaded situation, then the point is he was good to go to pitch. It's a one-run game. Maybe Brooks Raley comes in and he gives up a three-run homer, and then you could pitch Ryan Helsley in a 6-2 game and he gets a low-leverage situation. But wait till you get to that point where it's a low-leverage situation. It is a high-leverage situation against the top of the Tigers lineup in a one-run game. And you go to Helsley when you had Raley ready to go once Helsley gets into the slightest bit of trouble. There's no defending Carlos Mendoza. This is the biggest mistake he's made all season. And I'm never the guy that's ripping the manager. For someone that does as many podcasts as I do, I think I'm pretty fair to Carlos Mendoza because I think it's a thankless job to be a manager. But there have been times this season, this is not me saying, fire Mendoza. This is me saying Carlos Mendoza has not had the best of years. Carlos Mendoza has made some mistakes, and this game is on him. Yes, Helsley being bad, that's on Helsley. David Stearns acquiring Ryan Helsley. Tomorrow's show is funny enough. I was thinking, you know what? We have an off day. maybe it's time a month later to really revisit the trade deadline and just look at the moves the Mets made, which obviously most of them haven't worked out, but some have. Soto, Tyler Rogers, those moves have worked. So I'm going to do a podcast tomorrow where I'm not as emotional and I'm looking at the trade deadline as a whole and going through the whole thing and talking about the moves the Mets made and the prospect capital that was traded and the one that was kept and really trying to, again, remove some of the results, talk about the thought process, but also talk about what could have been done. And clearly the Mets could have done, they could have gotten Duran instead of Helsley if they want to push more of the chips in. And so if you want to blame front office, you can blame front office. If you want to blame player, which I think 9 times out of 10 I will do on this show, because at the end of the day, if Ryan Helsley just pitched to the back of the baseball card, that was the guy to get. And the Mets are in a much different position. But Ryan Helsley cannot get out of his own way. And so when you know that as the manager, that's why this game, not the stretch of the season, not what Helsley has done for the Mets and what has happened that has put him in this position, but knowing all of it and still going to Helsley in that spot, that's a brutal managerial decision. Because I understand you need to get Ryan Helsley right. I get that being a priority for this team because ultimately, I've already seen some people say DFA Helsley. That's not happening. Ryan Helsley is going to be on this roster. Just like at this point, Ryan Stanek is going to be on this roster. These guys throw really hard. Those are the types of arms you want in October, and you're going to keep giving them opportunities, hoping that they can click in when it matters most, just like Stanek did last year, and you have the back end of the bullpen that you need to navigate October. So I get trying to build Helsley up. I get even throwing him into some situations where there's leverage. But when you have an off day, you're wasting bullets. You're wasting guys that could go. And I promise you, there's going to be another opportunity, whether it's against the Reds or against the Phillies, where you can make enough of the excuses where you're looking at your pen, you're saying, yep, we're in a stretch, we're playing a bunch of games in a row, and I don't have Rogers available today, or I don't have Rayleigh available today. It's a 7th inning, and we need to find some bridge to Edwin Diaz. So, yeah, I'm going to give Helsley this leverage spot to try to inspire some confidence in him. You could have had those opportunities at another time. But in a 3-2 game, when Brooks Raley was ready to go, and you could have gone Raley against the top of that Tigers lineup, if he gets through it, maybe in a 3-2 game, the Mets are able to scratch a run and tie it up. Maybe you go to Tyler Rogers in the next inning, and he's able to put up 3 outs without giving up a run. Now, tie game, 9th inning, you have a chance to win it. You have a chance to sweep the Tigers and build some momentum going into your off day as you continue what is a very important road trip. Ultimately, the Mets did what they were supposed to. They went into Detroit, and they got 2 games. Great job. That's awesome. But you could have swept this series. You could have. It was right there. And if you lose the game 3-2, but you exhausted all of your options, well, hey, it's on the lineup, or you tip your cap to the Tigers pitchers for keeping you off balance for a game, and you move on, and it's no big deal. But instead, you got to deal with now a 48-hour news cycle where content creators like myself, and you have media outlets and TV, and everyone's going to be talking about Ryan Helsley sucking. So you tried to build his confidence, and guess what? You now knocked him down another 10 pegs. Now Ryan Helsley, is he going to feel great going to Cincinnati? He's going to be hearing it for the next 2 days without a chance to get back on the mound. And if it is just a mental problem for Helsley, and he's lost it between the ears, and it is, look, it's tough. When you don't perform for any team after the trade deadline, that jersey already is going to feel pretty heavy. But then when you have a Mets jersey with the spotlight that's on you, I sympathize for Helsley. Like, I feel bad for the guy. Like, it's a bad place to be in. And I still ultimately believe in the talent, because while now you're looking at a season ERA that's at 4.98, and you're looking at an ERA with the Mets that's 11.45, because he's given up 14 runs in his first 11 innings in a Mets uniform, has served up 3 homers, served up 4 homers all year for the Cardinals. And I saw there was a stat that went up. Let me see if I can pull it. I retweeted this. This is insane. Ryan Helsley's career SNY tweeted this out. 13.6% of Ryan Helsley's career earned runs have come as a Met. 3.5% of his career innings pitched have come as a Met. I mean, that's insane. You would not have expected it to be anywhere near this awful for Ryan Helsley, but it has been. And so in this situation for this specific game, and we'll talk more about, a little more of a linear game recap in the next segment, but while Helsley was the one that blew the game, and he has to be better. He has to find the command of his breaking balls. Despite even in the whole tipping the pitches conversation, Keith was pointing out with every single missed slider, he just does not have a feel for his breaking balls right now. That's a problem that has to be fixed, obviously. And it's on him to figure it out. But using Ryan Helsley against the top of the Tigers lineup in a 3-2 game, it's inexcusable. And I'm sure Mendoza will tell us his reasoning for it. But when you have an off day and there's only 23 of these games left, it's a missed opportunity. What if the Phillies lose tonight? What if the Phillies lose tomorrow? All of a sudden, you could have picked up a game and a half. And then you pick up a game over the weekend and you beat the Phillies in a series. All of a sudden, not that it's definitely something that you can vie for, but hey, at least you're in the conversation to make it a race. We'll see what the Reds do. Did the Reds play today? I don't even know. They're playing tonight. So we'll see what the Reds do tonight. But all of a sudden, the Reds can be a game closer to the Mets going into that series. It's just a mistake that shouldn't have been made. You should not have gone down with Ryan Helsley when you had Rayleigh, Rogers, and Diaz all waiting in the wings with 3 innings left to get outs. I mean, it's bad. How about this? If they use those 3 guys and you want to throw Helsley out there in the 10th inning, if you got to extra innings with a runner on second base and pitching some leverage, fine. If you lose a game in extra innings and you got there, it would have been okay. But it was just a big blunder by Mendoza. I want to talk about Clay Holmes, though, because I thought Clay Holmes was encouraging. I'll give you, again, more of a coherent kind of beginning to end game recap, but I think that spending the first segment on Ryan Helsley is where the attention should have been paid to, because that's clearly what was the deciding factor in this game, getting away from the New York Mets. So we'll go back and go through a clear game recap here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Upside. Are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with Upside. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code SEASON and get 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. First, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let software drive on by. Download the free Upside app now using that limited time promo code SEASON for a limited 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code SEASON. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. Thank you all to everybody that is tuning in on YouTube. Do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. Now, going to the start of this game, I thought Clay Holmes threw the ball very well, especially when you're grading on the curve of the Mets starting rotation right now. Holmes was in the strike zone pretty consistently. He was keeping the ball on the ground. First inning, gave up a leadoff single, gets a soft grounder that Hayden Sanger feels right in front of the plate. Couple strikeouts, looks solid to open up his day. Second inning, walks the leadoff man, then gets a rare double play on a fly ball that was hit to the warning track. Jeff McNeil makes a great over-the-shoulder catch. Spencer Torkelson tries to tag him first and get into scoring position to get the second, and McNeil delivers a strong one-hop throw and guns out the runner. You then had another base hit allowed by Holmes. Catcher's interference put a couple runners on, and then another base hit scored a run, but he gets a ground out, escapes, having given up only one run. Could have been multiple runs, I guess, if Torkelson did not tag up. But credit to the Mets defense for maybe shaving off a run there. You had Juan Soto Not one. So Francisco Lindor doubled in the third inning, and Pete Alonso doubled him home. So that's how the Mets first got on the board and tied up the game. Third inning, 1-2-3 frame for Holmes. Another couple of strikeouts against some of the best hitters the Tigers have in Kerry Carpenter and Riley Green. The Mets ended up getting a huge double play again in the fourth inning, where you had again Torkelson on first. Line drive hit to Pete Alonso, catches it, tags the runner, turns two. Holmes would give up a ground rule double, but he struck out Javi Baez to get through the fourth. Fifth inning, strikeout, walk, ground out, another walk, and that was the end of the day for Holmes. But overall, Clay Holmes goes 4 2/3, gives up 5 hits, 3 walks, 3 runs, 2 of them earned, 6 strikeouts. I thought it was a really solid performance. Even if he is more 5 and dive at this point, it's still a lot better than what the Mets have been getting from Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea and even David Peterson his last time out. It's a weird spot to be in with Clay Holmes, where I still think that having Clay Holmes in the bullpen could help the Mets when it comes to the Ryan Helsley problem that they currently have. At the same time, he's been solid his last couple times out. I mean, I want to say ever since Noel McLean came into this rotation, funny enough, Clay Holmes has been following up his starts and giving you really solid performances. I'd say the last 4 starts, right, should have all been solid. Let's see. Well, there was the start against the Braves. It wasn't great, but 4 of his last 5 have been pretty good. Or actually, maybe 5 of his last 6. You had the start against Cleveland. He goes 5 innings, gives up 2 runs. Has a bad start against the Braves where he gave up 5 runs in 3 2/3. Has 5 innings of 1-run ball in a Little League Classic against the Mariners. Against the A's, he goes 6 1/3, gives up 2. Against the Marlins, he gives up 2 earned runs. That was the game that he didn't make that catch. So there were some unearned runs, but he should have been able to honestly get through 6 that day if he made the catch and some other defense was made behind him, defensive plays. That could have been a 6-inning outing. And this one, obviously, he didn't get deep into the game, but it really very well could have been 5 innings of 2-run. Not even 2. It could have been 5 innings of 1-run ball if Mendoza either let him stay out there and maybe he is able to get that final out. I honestly would have let him get one more batter personally. I know he walked a few, but he wasn't getting hit very hard all day. So I maybe would have kept him out there. I'm also not going to quibble with that decision too much to have Gregory Soto go up left on left against Riley Green, if I'm not mistaken, right? That was the pitching change. Yeah, Gregory Soto. And look, Soto ends up throwing a slider into the backstop, and that allows both runners that Holmes had put on base. It allows both of them to advance. That's where one of the runs ends up being unearned because it wasn't on Holmes that wild pitch happened. It's on Soto. And then obviously Riley Green ends up getting the base hit that ultimately wins the game. Granted, the 3-run homer was the cherry on top for the Tigers, but that hit could have done it for Detroit. That pitch, though, really wasn't that bad. I mean, honestly, that's why I'm not sitting here ripping Gregory Soto or ripping the decision to put Gregory Soto in the game. You had 2 outs, and he threw a 98-mile-per-hour sinker that was a foot below the zone, and Riley Green just reached down and got it. Yes, maybe the location a little bit too middle, but I mean, he got ahead too. He threw a couple good sweepers in the zone to get ahead. Good, third pitch that was just off that Green fouled off, and then it was actually a sinker that threw into the backstop, not a sweeper or a slider. But it was just a good piece of hitting for Riley Green. Ultimately, I think the beginning of this game, the Mets were playing a solid baseball game. They really were. The defense was strong. Yes, they could not get much going on Casey Mize, but I thought Mize looked pretty good. He was attacking the zone pretty much all game, and the Tigers have a good bullpen too. So I'm not going to sit here and get on the offense for not scoring more. I thought they had some good at-bats. Starling Marte kind of killed them in this game. 6th inning, they did have a rally where Soto drew a leadoff walk. Pete Alonso ends up with an infield single. Great hustle by Pete to beat that out. Brandon Nimmo scalds one, and Javi Baez makes a leaping catch. So that easily could have fallen if Baez doesn't make that catch. And that's a double that scores a couple potentially. But Baez does make a great play on it. Mark Vientos, though, good piece of hitting. He's able to reach out, get a line drive into the outfield to score Soto, cut that lead to 3-2. You had Jeff McNeil, good at bat, loads the bases with the walk, and again, Starling Marte cost the Mets a couple times, and bases loaded spot, he grounds into a double play ball and really bails the Tigers out. So if a couple things go different, you score more runs. That's why I don't think that you can really criticize the offense too much. They've been fantastic for weeks now, and they had a great series. Again, if you look at the series as a whole, to go into Detroit against, by record, the best team in the American League all season, and to win a series, it's a good set for the Mets. There really isn't much to complain about if you're grading the series as a whole. Ultimately, today, it's just a matter of the decision to pitch Ryan Helsley. It leaves a stain on this game, and it leaves a stain going into the off day that you just didn't need. You didn't need to do it. You could have pitched some other guys, lost that game in a different way, and I think all we're saying is, all right, move on to Cincinnati. Again, if you had rolled with Raley, Rogers, and Diaz, and you wouldn't even gotten to Diaz. If you had rolled with Raley and Rogers and you lose the game 3-2, all right, some hits didn't fall. For them, a hit did, that big hit from Riley Green, and you just chalk it up to, hey, good team beat you. But when you put Ryan Helsley in that situation and it blows up your face as magnificently as it did, now the talking points go another direction. So it is as a team that plays in New York, but I think it could have been avoidable. And that's about all I have to say about it. I'm going to do, of course, your typical show tomorrow. As I already alluded to, the plan is I'm going to revisit the trade deadline. What a perfect time to do so. If Carlos Mendoza got the biggest part of the criticism today, tomorrow, maybe some criticism goes David Stern's way, but I'm going to be pretty fair about it and talk about the thought process and why I think the thought process that the Mets had at the trade deadline was spot on. I just think that the results, unfortunately, have not been there for them. And I guess the question then becomes, can the results turn around? Can this still end up being a trade deadline? We look back and say, the Mets did what they needed to, because come October, this brutal start to Ryan Helsley's Mets career has been flushed, and somehow he finds it. And there's big games in October where Ryan Helsley looks like the guy that warrants the Hell's Bells when he enters at Citi Field. And Tyler Rogers is nails in the playoffs, as is Gregory Soto. And all of a sudden, this bullpen that you built lives up to what it was supposed to be, a super bullpen. But for now, there's going to be some criticism on tomorrow's show as we discuss the Mets trade deadline. And then on Friday's show, I want to talk about the pitching in the Phillies series, because we learned today Sean Manaea is going to go on Monday. There's potentially going to be a minor league assignment for Kodai Senga if he accepts it. There's some talk about that. So we'll see what the news cycle has for us over the next 24 hours, or maybe about 36 hours before I record that show. And then I will have that for Friday, where we'll talk about, of course, Mets versus Reds over the weekend, but also looking at what the Mets can do to get creative for that 4 games that come up in Philly as they finish off here what is still a very important road trip. 7 critical games coming up against the Reds and the Phillies. This is what you want, though. Games that matter in September. It's going to be a fun finish either way. I appreciate all of you who tuned into the live stream. And for those of you who will watch the replay of this or listen to it on the audio side, as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. You make sure you subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Help us get to that number of 15,000 subscribers.